There are men whose charm blinds you, whose confidence seduces you, whose words seem to promise the very life your soul has longed for. But beneath their radiance lies something darker, a path they themselves do not fully understand, yet one that will draw you into its shadows. You believe you have chosen them, but in truth, it is your unconscious that has chosen, and it has chosen danger. You must understand, not all men walk the straight road of daylight. Some carry within them a secret pact with the underworld. They descend into the dark corridors of the psyche, and from there they speak with voices not entirely their own. These men can awaken in you a fascination so deep that it feels like destiny, but it is destiny mixed with poison. They know how to touch not your surface, but your wound. They do not see the smile you practice for the world, they see the hidden hunger you never confessed, and they feed it. The shocking truth is this: such men do not merely love you, they use you as a mirror for their own demons. They project their shadow into you until you begin to carry the burden of their unlived life. At first you feel chosen, even exalted, but slowly you sense a darkness that is not yours, creeping into your dreams, your moods, your very body. You find yourself both enchanted and enslaved. This is no accident. It is the power of the archetypes moving through him, seeking expression through you. Do not mistake me. I do not call these men evil. They are dangerous precisely because they are half-conscious, walking symbols of powers greater than themselves. They may lead you to transformation, or they may lead you to ruin. Their path is not lit by reason, but by the flickering torch of the unconscious. And if you follow them blindly, you will find yourself walking into the abyss with your eyes wide open. Listen carefully now. I will unveil the signs by which you may know such a man. Ignore them, and you may give your life to a shadow. See them clearly, and you may save your soul from his dark path. There exists in certain men a peculiar doubleness, an outer brilliance masking an inward fissure. They move through life as though illuminated from within, yet the light they carry is fed by darkness. Their charm, their confidence, their apparent mastery of fate conceal a struggle invisible even to themselves. For within them two forces contend, consciousness and the shadow, each seeking dominion over the soul. This duality is not moral but ontological. Every human being contains the same division, but in some men it becomes heightened, dramatized, made visible. They are instruments upon which the tension of opposites is played more violently than in others. Such men, though unaware, serve the collective unconscious. They embody what the age refuses to see, carrying within themselves the unlived shadow of many. When a woman meets such a man, she feels a disturbance in the air around him. His presence carries the vibration of unresolved depths. She senses power, mystery, and danger mingled together, and something in her responds. It is not her reason that draws her, but her instinct, for her own unconscious recognizes its reflection. The fascination she feels is not personal, it is archetypal. I have long observed that what we call attraction is often the psyche's strategy for self-knowledge. The unconscious employs the language of fascination to draw us toward what we most need to confront. Thus, when a woman feels magnetized by a man's darkness, it is her own hidden darkness that calls to her through him. She imagines she approaches another, but she approaches herself. Some of these men consciously manipulate, weaving deception as art, but the more dangerous kind are not deceivers by intent. They are possessed. They speak with the voices of forces they do not understand. They are mediums of the collective shadow, carrying impulses too vast for their individuality. In them, the boundary between human will and archetypal compulsion dissolves, and thus they act out myths rather than choices. This possession manifests in strange paradox. Outwardly, they may appear radiant, full of vitality, confidence, and seduction. Inwardly, they are divided, tormented by something they cannot name. Their energy comes not from harmony, but from conflict. They burn with the fire of the opposites, and that fire gives them the glitter that fascinates the soul. Their charisma is the light of a wound that will not heal. Every era produces such figures. They emerge from the collective as symbols of what the culture represses: the outlaw, the prophet, the visionary, the destroyer. Women, whose intuition is tuned to the unconscious, are drawn to them with the same mixture of awe and dread that the ancients felt toward gods. For these men are not merely individuals, they are thresholds between the human and the numinous. Yet to stand at such a threshold is perilous. The man himself often mistakes his brilliance for virtue. He believes he commands his darkness because he can articulate it, But the shadow, once awakened, does not obey the intellect. It demands participation. And so he continues his descent, half willing, half compelled, feeding upon the very forces that will one day consume him. I have seen this countless times in dreams. The radiant hero descending into the underworld, believing himself master of the journey, unaware that the descent is not chosen but ordained. There, in the black caverns of the psyche, he makes his secret pact. He exchanges peace for power, love for fascination, wholeness for intensity. From that moment on, he becomes the servant of energies he imagines he commands. To others, he appears irresistible. His words carry the scent of danger. His silence invites imagination to fill it with meaning. The woman who meets him feels she has encountered fate, yet what she has met is her own projection mirrored in his aura. The archetype of the wounded Redeemer awakens in her, and she longs to heal him, not knowing that what she seeks to heal is her own unlived pain. This is the secret of their bond. Her longing answers his wound. His darkness answers her hunger. Each believes they have met destiny, when in truth the unconscious has orchestrated their meeting as a mirror. She believes she will save him. He believes he will possess her. Both are drawn into the ancient drama of Eros and the shadow. Through each other, they encounter the unknown within themselves. But why does the psyche seek danger? Why is the soul more moved by darkness than by light? Because consciousness is not born from comfort. The ego clings to safety, but the self requires expansion, and expansion demands confrontation with the opposite. Thus, the psyche lures us toward what threatens us, knowing that only in such encounters can we awaken. There is wisdom in this peril. The darkness that fascinates is not necessarily demonic. It may be the womb of transformation. Yet to approach it without awareness is to court destruction. The man who carries darkness unconsciously can awaken it in others with devastating effect. What he does not integrate becomes contagious. His shadow, projected outward, infects those who love him most. And yet I cannot condemn these men. They are instruments of a deeper necessity. The world's unacknowledged suffering finds voice through them. They reveal to us what society denies, that good and evil are woven together, that beauty often conceals corruption, and that no soul is pure. To encounter them is to be reminded that life itself is tragic, an interplay of creation and destruction, light and shadow. The woman who recognizes this truth ceases to romanticize him. She sees the pattern behind his charm. She no longer asks whether he is good or bad, but what he mirrors in her own unconscious. In that moment, fascination becomes insight. The power of the archetype weakens, and consciousness begins to dawn. She steps out of the spell and begins her own descent, this time willingly, inwardly, into her own depths. I must emphasize again, not all darkness is evil. The soul requires shadow as the body requires night for rest. The man who carries the dark can become, for the conscious woman, a messenger from her own unknown. If she meets him with awareness, she may learn through him the nature of her own hidden powers. But if she meets him blindly, she will suffer possession not by him, but by her own projections. Therefore, discernment is the first defense of the soul. To see the archetype moving within the man, to separate person from symbol, is to preserve freedom. For symbols demand reverence, but people require compassion. If she confuses the two, she will worship where she should understand and surrender where she should observe. These men, half angel and half beast, reveal to us the structure of the psyche itself. They remind us that the light we admire in others is born of the same fire that burns within our own darkness. To love them consciously is to recognize that the divine descends through imperfection. To hate them blindly is to deny our own capacity for shadow. The unconscious chooses such encounters for reasons the ego cannot fathom. They appear as accidents, coincidences, or fated loves, yet behind them stands necessity. The self arranges them as mirrors, as trials, as catalysts for growth. When the lesson is learned, the figure dissolves, leaving behind a wound that becomes wisdom. Thus begins the journey of awakening. The woman who has looked upon the shadowed man and lived now knows that darkness is not the enemy but the threshold. Through him, she has glimpsed the architecture of the psyche, the interweaving of desire, fear, and revelation. His dark path has led her to the entrance of her own. And so, I say again, do not fear the dark men who cross your way, but approach them with the lantern of consciousness. They are warnings and invitations alike. In their eyes you may glimpse ruin, but also redemption. For behind their mask of radiance lies the oldest secret of all, that the darkness we dread is the very substance from which the soul grows its light. There are men who can sense a woman's pain before she utters a word. Their perception is not empathy in the moral sense, it is instinct. Like creatures of the night who hunt by vibration, they feel the tremor of what is unhealed in others. When such a man enters your life, he seems to know you in ways you cannot explain. He touches the wound you hide from the world and calls it love. This attraction is not accidental. It is a meeting of two incomplete souls drawn together by the archetype of the wounded pair, the eternal union between the broken masculine and the broken feminine. Beneath the surface of romance, the unconscious seeks wholeness. Each becomes the mirror through which the other glimpses the part of themselves long buried. The feeling of destiny that accompanies such love is the psyche's way of announcing its need for integration. In every woman lives an ancient longing to be seen beyond her mask, to be recognized not for her beauty or virtue, but for her hidden truth. The man who senses this and names it seems to perform a miracle. His words touch a secret place untouched by the ordinary, but what feels divine in the beginning may conceal danger. For when he awakens her buried pain, she may mistake that awakening for salvation. The truth is that the wound is sacred. It is the place where the self seeks entry. But when love approaches it without consciousness, the sacred becomes perilous. The man who mirrors your pain can either help you heal or deepen your bondage. It depends not on his intention, but on your awareness. If you mistake his recognition for redemption, you surrender your power to the very force that wounds you. These men are not necessarily wicked, they are instruments of a deeper economy of the soul. Their ability to mirror arises from their own unhealed fractures. They have touched their darkness, but not yet transformed it. When they meet a woman whose soul carries similar wounds, the two wounds resonate. Each feels seen, but it is pain recognizing pain. The energy between them is immense, for suffering, like love, binds souls with primal force. It is the tragedy of the half-conscious man that he awakens others to depths he cannot bear himself. His gaze penetrates, but his heart cannot contain what he evokes. He opens the door to the underworld, but does not stand guard at its threshold. Thus, the woman who follows his invitation finds herself descending alone. What began as union becomes initiation. In mythology, Psyche was forbidden to look upon Eros. Her love demanded blindness, because consciousness would break the spell. So it is in the psychic realm. The moment we see clearly, the illusion dies. The love that felt eternal dissolves, revealing its true purpose, not permanence, but awakening. The dark man's gift is precisely this disillusionment. He compels the woman to see what her heart would rather ignore, that her longing for completion was always a longing for her own soul. When she is with him, her emotions magnify. Her tenderness becomes devotion. Her vulnerability becomes worship. She feels as though she has entered a temple. In truth, she has, but it is not his. It is the temple of her own psyche, long abandoned, now reopened by his presence. The God she kneels before is not the man, but the image of her inner divinity projected onto him. This is the mystery of Eros. It binds us to another so that we might find ourselves. But to recognize this requires painful honesty. Most prefer to live the dream until it collapses. The woman tells herself she has found the one who finally understands her. She interprets his volatility as depth, his inconsistency as passion. The more she gives, the more she loses herself, until her identity begins to dissolve. What she calls love is the psyche's ritual of death and rebirth, the sacrifice of the old self on the altar of transformation. Such love intoxicates because it offers a taste of transcendence. In his arms, she feels whole. The separation between self and other vanishes. For a moment, eternity seems near. But this unity cannot endure, because it is achieved through projection, not integration. The divine belongs not to the man, but to the image she has cast upon him. When reality intrudes, the god becomes mortal, and the temple collapses. If she is not conscious, she will interpret this collapse as betrayal. She will curse him, not realizing that he merely reflected what she could not yet hold within herself. The pain that follows such disillusionment is immense, but it is holy pain. It marks the breaking of the projection, the liberation of her own soul from its enchantment. What felt like destruction is in truth revelation. The psychic exchange between them is profound. Her tenderness awakens in him what he has long repressed the memory of feeling, the possibility of soul. He, in turn, awakens her forgotten strength, the capacity to confront darkness without surrender. But if either clings to the other as savior, the flow becomes bondage. Love decays into possession. Devotion becomes dependency. The alchemy halts. I have seen how women mistake this emotional intoxication for divine calling. They say, "I cannot let him go. It feels fated." And they are right, it is fated, but not in the way they think. The fate is psychological, not romantic. The unconscious has orchestrated the meeting to force growth, not permanence. The man is a catalyst, not a companion. To cling to him after his work is done is to cling to the fire that has already purified you. It is no easy task to discern the difference between genuine soul contact and shadow projection. The test lies in energy. True connection strengthens, projection exhausts. Love that arises from the self nourishes both. Love that arises from the wound drains vitality, leaving one alternately exalted and despairing. If you find yourself diminished, anxious, or emptied, you are feeding the shadow, not the soul. To stand in such fire consciously requires courage. You must hold the tension of opposites, attraction and fear, tenderness and self-preservation. You must resist the urge to dissolve, for only by remaining whole can you transform the encounter into wisdom. The woman who can stay awake while standing in the storm becomes sovereign of her own psyche. She learns to love without losing herself. In every age, myths warn of this seduction. The sirens, the vampires, the lovers who destroy and redeem all are images of the same truth. The psyche uses eros as instrument of transformation. The one who approaches love without awareness becomes sacrifice. The one who approaches it with consciousness becomes initiate. The difference lies in whether you cling to the image or seek the reality behind it. When you recognize that the man who saw you merely mirrored what you had forgotten to see in yourself, the spell breaks. The wound he touched becomes doorway, not prison. You begin to see that the longing he awakened was never for him, but for the unlived life within you. This realization, though bitter, is the beginning of freedom. There is no shame in having been deceived by the mirror. It is through such enchantment that consciousness grows. The psyche educates through experience, not through avoidance. Each illusion, once suffered, becomes insight. The man who awakened your wound has therefore served your individuation, whether he knew it or not. In the end, every woman must remember her own center. No love, however exalted, can substitute for the relationship between the ego and the self. The true partner is the inner guide, the voice that whispers beneath the noise of passion. Be still. Do not give away what is sacred. Let love reveal, but do not let it consume. For eros is double-edged, both god and daemon. It destroys to create, wounds to awaken. If you meet it without awareness, it will strip you bare. But if you meet it with open eyes, it will make you whole. The dark man who touches your wound is therefore not your enemy, but your initiation. Through him, you discover the depth and danger of your own soul, and if you are brave enough, its infinite capacity for rebirth. There is a difference between a man who knows his darkness and one who is ruled by it. The first has wrestled with his demons and carries them like tamed beasts. The second is devoured by them while believing himself master. To the untrained eye, they appear the same, both intense, magnetic, and full of mystery, but the quality of their presence betrays their nature. One radiates depth, the other contagion. The possessed man is not evil in the moral sense. He is tragic. Somewhere in his history, he turned away from his own soul. Perhaps life dealt him wounds he could not face. Perhaps pride forbade him humility. Whatever the reason, a rift opened within him, and into that void the shadow rushed. He became not a man, but a stage upon which unseen forces enact their dramas. Possession begins subtly. A thought repeated too long becomes obsession. An emotion indulged becomes identity. The unconscious, denied its rightful expression, takes command. At first, the man believes he is pursuing ideals or passions. Soon, he finds himself driven by moods that seem to come from nowhere. His will grows weak. His words become instruments of something deeper and darker. He mistakes the whisper of the abyss for inspiration. The energy of the possessed man is formidable. Because he is plugged directly into the currents of the unconscious, he carries vitality that ordinary men lack. Women feel it instantly, that strange charge that surrounds him like invisible electricity. He can make a room tremble without speaking. His eyes, sometimes empty, sometimes aflame, seem to promise revelation. The feminine soul senses in him both danger and divinity. This magnetism is the counterfeit of true spiritual power. It is not the calm light of consciousness, but the flicker of the underworld. His words captivate because they are fueled by archetypal energies, ancient voices speaking through a modern tongue. He does not know he is their mouthpiece. He believes he has discovered profound truths. Yet what speaks through him are fragments of the collective shadow, seeking expression through his life. To such a man, moral contradictions are inevitable. One moment he may speak of love, the next he wounds without remorse. He can be generous and cruel in the same breath, saintly by day and destructive by night. This duality confuses those who love him, for they sense sincerity in both his tenderness and his cruelty. The truth is that he no longer acts, he is acted through. The psyche, uncontained, plays its symphony of opposites through his being. Women mistake this turbulence for depth because it echoes their own inner conflict. His unpredictability mirrors the chaos of their own unlived emotions, and they interpret resonance as intimacy. They believe that beneath his contradictions lies authenticity, when in fact it is possession. Passion, in its purest form, is creative fire. Possession is wildfire, uncontrolled, consuming both lover and beloved alike. I have seen the possessed man in my dreams, a figure of light standing upon a pit of serpents, unaware that the glow around him comes from their writhing. He mistakes the illumination of danger for the radiance of divinity. Such men often rise to positions of influence, for the world confuses intensity with wisdom. They become leaders, artists, prophets, each channeling the unrest of the collective unconscious into form. Yet because they lack awareness, their creations carry both beauty and destruction. His charm has weight, because it is charged with archetypal tension. When he speaks of freedom, he awakens rebellion. When he speaks of love, he evokes longing mixed with despair. He does not merely communicate ideas, he transmits moods, as if his soul were a tuning fork vibrating with the music of the abyss. Those who listen too closely risk attuning to that same discord. To love such a man is to walk the narrow bridge between fascination and ruin. At first his darkness seems noble, a sign of complexity, depth, or genius. But soon you notice the dissonance, the contradiction between his words and his atmosphere. He speaks of truth yet breeds confusion, of unity yet sows division. This is the mark of possession. The energy moving through him exceeds his capacity to contain it, and thus it spills outward, infecting those near him. You will know him by the unease that follows his absence. When he leaves, the world feels colorless, drained, as if he has taken your vitality with him. This is not love, it is psychic contagion. You have been drawn into the orbit of an energy larger than both of you, and now it feeds through you as well. The unconscious spreads not by argument but by sympathy. To understand such men, one must abandon moral judgment and adopt symbolic sight. In myth, they are the sorcerers, the fallen priests, the kings who once communed with gods and later defied them. Their power arises from transgression, from touching the sacred without reverence. They are punished not by divine wrath but by inner fragmentation. The energy they have stolen consumes them from within. Some women believe they can redeem such men. They feel compassion, sensing the wounded child buried beneath the archetype. Yet compassion without awareness becomes captivity. The moment she confuses pity with love, she is lost. The possessed man cannot be healed by devotion, for devotion only strengthens the forces that control him. He must confront his own shadow, but few ever do. The task, then, for the woman who encounters him, is to see without being ensnared. She must recognize the possession and withdraw her projection. She must resist both fascination and judgment, for both are forms of participation. To see clearly is to break the spell. The moment she perceives that his darkness is not personal but archetypal, the psychic bond weakens. What was enchantment becomes understanding. This does not mean she must despise him. True vision brings compassion, not hatred. The possessed man is, after all, a servant of evolution's dark side. Through his turmoil, the unconscious reveals its unacknowledged powers. But one must love him as one loves a storm from shelter. To step too near is to lose one's footing in the wind. If he himself awakens, and a few do, the possession may transform into vocation. Once the shadow is recognized and integrated, the energy that enslaved becomes creative. He may become healer, teacher, artist, one who channels darkness into form without being consumed. But such redemption requires profound suffering, humility, and often isolation. Most are too proud to descend willingly into the depths of their own corruption. You will feel the difference immediately between one who has descended and returned and one still trapped in the underworld. The first carries gravity but also gentleness. The second radiates tension and restlessness. The first has warmth that steadies. The second burns without light. The difference lies not in what they have experienced, but in what they have integrated. Archetypal possession is not confined to individuals. It can seize entire groups, nations, or movements. The possessed man becomes its prophet, speaking with conviction that blinds reason. His followers, entranced by his certainty, mistake archetypal energy for truth. In this way, personal shadow becomes collective destiny. To see through such possession is to reclaim one's soul from the contagion of mass unconsciousness. The woman who resists this possession becomes a guardian of consciousness. By refusing to project divinity or damnation onto the man, she restores balance between the sexes at the psychic level. She becomes mirror, not victim. Her clarity may even serve as the first light that guides him toward his own awakening, though that outcome is not hers to ensure. Her task is to remain whole, to hold the awareness that what enslaves him cannot define her. It is tempting to call such men monsters, yet that would be too simple. They are human vessels of something vast and unfinished in humanity itself. Their destructiveness reflects the collective refusal to integrate shadow. If society revered introspection, there would be fewer possessed men. But we worship success, dominance, and light, forcing the rejected darkness to incarnate through those least able to bear it. Therefore, pity them, but do not follow them. Recognize that what fascinates you in them is also within you: the longing for power, the seduction of intensity, the hunger for meaning. When you claim these forces in yourself, their influence fades. The possessed man loses his hold over those who have integrated their own shadow. His spell depends on your denial. Every encounter with such darkness is an initiation. The man may fall, but if you see truly, you will rise. You will understand that possession is the extreme form of what lives quietly in every heart, the eternal struggle between the conscious and the unconscious, between spirit and instinct. By seeing him clearly, you glimpse the architecture of your own psyche, and that vision, though unsettling, is liberating. Remember always, compassion without captivity, understanding without participation. Love the man as symbol, but protect yourself as soul. The forces moving through him are ancient and impersonal. They seek expression, not relationship. To stand near him consciously is to witness the drama of the world's soul, a drama as old as creation, itself, where light forever descends into darkness seeking to know itself. Every descent begins in the name of love. The woman believes she is entering intimacy. She does not yet know she is entering myth. At first, it feels like awakening. Her senses sharpen, her emotions deepen, and her dreams grow vivid. The man seems to open doors in her soul that had long been sealed. She calls this passion. In truth, it is possession. The threshold has already been crossed. When a woman loves a man ruled by his shadow, her psyche begins to mirror his. She absorbs his moods, his anxieties, his conflicts. Her own thoughts become saturated with his energy. She dreams his dreams. What she feels as devotion is often psychic contagion, a mingling of unconscious materials that blurs the boundaries of self. Slowly, she begins to live his fate without realizing it. This process is ancient as time. The Greeks told of Persephone, the maiden of light, abducted into Hades by the god of the underworld. Yet what they did not say is that the abduction was also a longing, the pull of the unconscious toward depth. The feminine soul is not content with surface existence. It hungers for transformation, and so it consents, though secretly, to its own descent. Love becomes the instrument of that surrender. Such unions feel ordained. The woman says, "I have never felt anything like this." She interprets the overwhelming attraction as proof of destiny. In psychological truth, it is the compulsion of archetypes. The unconscious arranges the meeting as a drama through which hidden elements of the soul might emerge. The sense of inevitability is real, but it serves evolution, not happiness. At first, she is intoxicated. The man's intensity seems to awaken her own. His words strike chords long silent. She feels she has found her reflection in masculine form, someone who sees, feels, and understands the depth she carries. What she does not see is that his perception is not pure. sight but projection. He sees not her soul but his anima, the feminine image buried in his own psyche. And she, enthralled, mistakes his hunger for her essence as recognition of her being. Slowly, her vitality begins to wane. His darkness seeps into her through affection, through empathy, through the invisible exchange of energy that always occurs between lovers. She feels responsible for his moods, compelled to soothe his torment, to rescue the child within him. In doing so, she surrenders her boundaries, and the abyss opens beneath her feet. The love that promised liberation becomes servitude to forces she cannot name. I have observed that the unconscious devours those who serve it without awareness. The woman believes she suffers for love, but she suffers for lack of consciousness. Her instinct, trained by culture to nurture and redeem, turns inward against her. She begins to sacrifice herself upon the altar of his potential. Her tenderness, meant to heal, becomes the very food of his shadow. Thus, she participates unwittingly in his possession. Her friends warn her, but she cannot hear. The spell of archetype is stronger than reason. She says, "You do not understand. Our connection is different." Indeed, it is different. It is mythic. She has entered the underworld, and the laws of daylight no longer apply. Down here, everything is inverted. Cruelty appears as depth, instability as genius, domination as passion. She interprets her suffering as proof of meaning, because meaning is the only thing that makes pain bearable. The stages of descent follow an ancient pattern. First comes fascination, the golden season of enchantment, when the world seems to revolve around him. Then devotion. She centers her life upon the relationship, neglecting her own growth. Next comes exhaustion, the psychic depletion that results from sustained imbalance. Then despair, when she realizes that love cannot redeem the possessed. Finally, if she survives, awakening, the psychic depletion, painful recognition that the darkness she fought in him is her own. To survive, she must recognize the myth she is living. Persephone cannot remain a child of spring once she has eaten the fruit of the underworld. The woman must admit her complicity in her descent, that she, too, sought the forbidden depth. Only through this confession does the process become conscious. Otherwise, she remains victim of her own unconscious longing for transformation disguised as love. There is a kind of vampirism that occurs in such unions, though it is not deliberate. The man draws upon her psychic energy to sustain his own instability. Her empathy becomes his nourishment. She feels herself drained, but interprets the depletion as proof of her devotion. In this way, the archetype perpetuates itself. The savior-martyr dynamic, the healer and the wounded one, the redeemer and the fallen. Each feeds the other's illusion. When the woman's vitality begins to collapse, dreams often intervene. The unconscious speaks in images when words fail. She may dream of drowning, of dark houses, of broken mirrors. These are messages from the self, urging separation not only from the man, but from the unconscious fusion itself. If she listens, she begins to reclaim fragments of her autonomy. If she ignores them, her descent deepens into despair. Many confuse this suffering with virtue, as though endurance were proof of love's purity. But endurance without awareness is imprisonment. True love demands clarity, not sacrifice. The woman who remains in darkness out of pity or fear betrays her own soul. The psyche exacts a heavy price for such denial: depression, anxiety, loss of meaning. What she refuses to face outwardly manifests inwardly as illness of spirit. And yet, even in ruin, grace is concealed, for the descent is not meaningless, it is initiation. Every Persephone must taste the pomegranate seed to become queen of both worlds. The woman who has lived through a dark relationship, if she makes it conscious, emerges with insight that no book can teach. She learns the anatomy of possession, the subtle interplay of light and shadow in love. She discovers that darkness, once faced, is not annihilation but revelation. I recall a patient who, after leaving such a man, said to me, "I feel I have died." And I answered, "Yes, but what has died is the illusion that you were incomplete. The death of that illusion is the beginning of individuation. The pain of loss becomes the birth pangs of selfhood. The same energy that once bound her to the man now turns inward, fueling her own transformation. To look back upon the relationship with consciousness is to see its symbolic pattern. The man was not simply cruel or charming. He was the emissary of her own unconscious, the dark messenger sent to awaken what had slept. His betrayal, though humanly tragic, was psychically necessary. Without it, she would never have learned discernment, never have reclaimed her power to see. Once she understands this, forgiveness arises, not sentimental forgiveness of the man, but metaphysical forgiveness of life itself. She no longer curses the darkness that wounded her, for she sees that it was the darkness that brought her to light. The experience, once unbearable, becomes sacred memory, an inner myth that guides others still lost in the labyrinth. This is the hidden wisdom of descent, that what destroys the ego may liberate the soul. The woman who survives the underworld returns not as she was, but as one who has seen. Her eyes, once blind with fascination, now perceive depth in all things. She moves through life with quiet authority, for she knows the cost of unconsciousness. She no longer confuses passion with possession, nor darkness with love. Thus the descent, though it begins in tragedy, ends in revelation. The abyss she entered for a man becomes the chamber where she meets herself. The love that seemed her undoing becomes her initiation into wholeness. Through suffering, she learns the supreme paradox, that the soul cannot awaken until it has first been wounded. And when she emerges, the world appears changed. Colors are sharper, silence is deeper, solitude no longer empty, but full of presence. She knows now that the true underworld lies not beneath the earth, but within the human heart. And having walked its corridors, she carries in her gaze the light of one who has seen both heaven and hell, and found in both the face of the self. The woman who has descended into darkness does not rise again through resistance, but through recognition. Liberation does not occur when she condemns the man or denies her experience. It begins when she sees clearly what she has become, for consciousness is the true solvent of enchantment. Once she looks without distortion at what the relationship has wrought, the spell begins to dissolve. In that moment of lucidity, grief rushes in. She sees how much of her vitality was spent in illusion, how deeply she mistook possession for love. The grief is sacred. It purifies. It burns away the remnants of projection, returning the energy of fascination to its rightful source, the self. This sorrow, though it feels like death, is the first step of alchemy, the nigredo, the blackening of matter before the birth of light. In the nigredo, all certainties disintegrate. She feels emptied, stripped of meaning, as though her life has been reduced to ashes. But within these ashes, the gold begins to form. For now, for the first time, she stands alone, not as half of a union, not as savior or victim, but as consciousness itself. This desolation is not punishment, it is purification. The ego, humbled, relinquishes control, and the soul begins to speak. She may look upon the man who wounded her and feel no hatred, only comprehension. She sees that he was never the source of her suffering, but the mirror in which it took shape. Through him, her own unlived life became visible. Every insult, every betrayal, every longing now appears as symbol. The dream has changed form. It is no longer a personal tragedy, but an initiation into knowledge. The alchemist spoke of turning lead into gold, but the true transmutation is psychological. The lead is the weight of unconsciousness. The gold is awareness. Each experience of darkness, once integrated, becomes luminous. The woman who has passed through the fire of disillusionment holds in her heart a light that does not depend on another. Her love, once a plea, becomes a presence. She begins to sense that what drew her to the dark man was not folly, but destiny. Her soul required confrontation with shadow in order to awaken its latent strength. The forces that once enslaved her now serve her. The energy of desire, reclaimed from projection, returns as intuition, creativity, and inner authority. What was once directed outward toward him now flows inward toward her own becoming. Liberation is not escape, it is assimilation. To reject the past is to remain bound to it. But to absorb it, to carry its image consciously, is to be free. The relationship becomes an inner symbol, the sacred wound through which the divine entered. She no longer seeks to forget, for memory itself has become teacher. The man who once haunted her has become her myth, and myths, when understood, guide the soul rather than enslave it. Now she discovers the difference between love and dependence. Love allows space, dependence clings. Love gives without fear of loss, dependence hoards, because it is terrified of emptiness. In the underworld, she has tasted emptiness and found it survivable. Therefore, she can now love without chains. Her heart, purified by fire, no longer demands to possess. It knows that to love is to reflect, not to consume. In dreams, she may see images of renewal gardens sprouting in barren soil, rivers flowing again through desolate valleys. These are signs that the psyche has begun to heal. The self, once veiled by projection, reveals itself as the source of all meaning. What she once sought in the man she now finds within. This discovery is not prideful, it is reverent. She sees that divinity does not reside in others, but in the living current that animates her consciousness. The alchemy of liberation follows its own rhythm. There are regressions, nights of longing when the old image returns. She may dream of him again, not as tormentor but as symbol. Each dream brings integration of another fragment of the past. Slowly, the opposites within her, love and fear, tenderness and anger, trust and betrayal, begin to reconcile. This reconciliation is the second stage of alchemy, albedo, the whitening, when the purified elements unite to form new clarity. Now her solitude ceases to feel like exile. It becomes sanctuary. In silence, she communes with the inner figures that once governed her from the shadows. The animus, once projected outward as the dangerous man, returns as inner guide. He speaks not through the words of another, but through intuition, through dreams, through the quiet assurance of self-knowledge. What she once sought in him, she now receives from within. I have often said that one cannot integrate the shadow by fleeing it. One must live through its manifestations and then reflect upon them. This reflection is the crucible of alchemy. The woman who dares to look upon her own complicity in suffering, her blindness, her idealization, her fear of solitude transforms guilt into wisdom. What was once shame becomes humility, and humility is the foundation of consciousness. As she reclaims her energy, her perception of men changes. She no longer divides them into saints and devils. She sees the same struggle in each, the tension between spirit and instinct, between longing for the divine and bondage to the animal. Compassion arises, but without sentimentality. She can love without illusion, because she no longer seeks completion in another. Liberation also alters her relationship to herself. She discovers that self-love is not vanity, but recognition of the self, the divine principle that works through her. To honor oneself is to honor the creative intelligence of the unconscious. She begins to live in dialogue with it, no longer as victim of fate, but as participant in her own evolution. Life, once chaotic, now unfolds symbolically. Each event carries meaning, each emotion, instruction. This new awareness is fragile at first. The old patterns may attempt to reassert themselves. Another man may appear with the same charisma, the same dark fascination, but now she recognizes the pattern. What once bewitched her now reveals itself as archetype. The repetition loses its grip, and she smiles with quiet recognition. Consciousness has broken the cycle. She learns that freedom is not achieved by conquest, but by understanding. The forces that once ruled her are not enemies, but energies waiting for direction. She channels them into art, study, compassion, solitude. The libido that once sought fusion with another now seeks expression through creation. The same fire that once burned becomes light. This is the rubedo, the reddening, when spirit and matter unite in creative wholeness. Sometimes she will remember his face and feel a strange tenderness, not the yearning of old, but gratitude. For without his darkness, she would never have discovered her own light. What she once called ruin, she now calls initiation. The man who wounded her was the midwife of her soul's birth. She blesses him not for his virtue, but for his role in her transformation. In the end, she sees that the relationship was never about two individuals. It was the dance of archetypes, the meeting of shadow and anima, the eternal struggle between love and power. To have lived this consciously is to have participated in the oldest drama of existence, and through her, that drama has found its completion. Liberation, then, is not the you-works, absence of darkness, but its integration. She no longer fears the shadow within or without. She can look upon the world's corruption without despair, because she has met her own and survived. Her compassion now includes both sinner and saint, both the wounded man and the woman he wounded. Such compassion is the hallmark of the individuated soul. Thus the alchemical work concludes. The woman who entered the underworld seeking love emerges bearing wisdom. She has discovered that every descent conceals an ascent, every wound conceals a treasure. Her heart, once divided, now beats in harmony with the rhythm of the universe, the eternal cycle of death and rebirth, dissolution and creation. And from this harmony arises a new kind of strength, the quiet power of one who no longer seeks permission to exist. She lives not by borrowed light, but by her own. Her love, once desperate, has become sovereign. She has found the philosopher's stone, not in any man, not in the world, but in the awakened soul that has learned to transmute darkness into consciousness. When consciousness ripens in both man and woman, the tragedy that once bound them becomes the seed of reconciliation. For it is not enough that one awaken while the other sleeps. Both poles of humanity must learn to see. The work of liberation, if complete, restores balance between the masculine and feminine, not merely within individuals, but within the life of the world. The redeemed masculine is not a new figure invented by ideals. It is the ancient man made whole. He has passed through pride and humiliation, through lust for power and hunger for approval, and has emerged stripped of pretense. His strength is no longer force but presence, no longer domination but protection. He no longer seeks to subdue the feminine, because he has discovered her within himself as the soul that gives meaning to his actions. The conscious feminine, in turn, has learned to stand without dependence. She has reclaimed her vision, her instinct, her authority to name truth. She no longer projects divinity outward, for she has seen that the divine resides in her depth. Thus, when these two meet, the man who serves the self and the woman who listens to it, their union becomes a mirror of cosmic harmony rather than a battlefield of projections. When I speak of this reconciliation, I do not mean the sentimental peace of surface agreement. I mean the living balance of opposites held in creative tension. The masculine principle without consciousness becomes tyranny. The feminine without it becomes chaos. Only when each recognizes its own incompleteness and honors the other does the human soul attain equilibrium. The man who has faced his shadow knows that strength without humility is hollow. He becomes guide rather than ruler. He speaks less, listens more. He can bear the storm of emotion without retreat because he has weathered his own. His presence steadies, not commands. He is no longer the sun that blinds, but the flame that warms. In his company, the woman feels space, not confinement, challenge, not threat. The woman who has journeyed through darkness recognizes this difference instantly. She feels in him the quiet rhythm of authenticity, a power that does not seek to impress. She responds not with submission, but with trust. For the feminine does not resist strength when it is clean. She resists coercion masquerading as love. The redeemed masculine no longer wounds because it no longer fears. His authority arises from inner alignment, not outer dominance. When such a man and woman meet, love changes form. It ceases to be fusion and becomes communion. Each stands whole, yet willingly opens to the other. Their eros is not a consuming flame, but a sacred fire that illumines without destroying. In their union, the divine polarity finds expression, the active and the receptive, the spirit and the body, the word and the silence. Through them, the archetype of wholeness takes form in the world. This inner marriage, the coniunctio, is the goal of individuation. It is not a fantasy of perpetual bliss, but the reconciliation of spirit and matter within the human being. The outer relationship merely reflects this inner harmony. The man recognizes the anima as guide of his soul, and the woman embraces the animus as her capacity for insight and courage. What once divided them, projection and fear, now becomes bridge and understanding. Yet this harmony cannot be forced. It arises only after both have passed through fire. The woman must release her fascination with suffering. The man must relinquish his addiction to control. They must meet not as halves seeking completion, but as wholes seeking reflection. Only then does love cease to be bondage and become revelation. In such unions, eros transforms into devotion to truth. The passion that once sought possession now serves the growth of consciousness itself. Each becomes guardian of the other's integrity. When conflict arises, it is not a battle for dominance, but an opportunity to bring shadow to light. The relationship becomes living alchemy, two crucibles refining each other toward gold. The world hungers for this reconciliation. For centuries, the masculine has ruled without soul, and the feminine has suffered without voice. The result is collective imbalance, technology without wisdom, progress without purpose, abundance without reverence. The healing of civilization begins not in institutions, but in the psyche, in the marriage of these principles within each individual. The redeemed masculine contributes order, discernment, and discipline, the capacity to give form to vision. The conscious feminine offers empathy, intuition, and meaning, the capacity to breathe soul into form. Without the feminine, the world becomes mechanism. Without the masculine, it dissolves into sentiment. Only together do they sustain creation. In the man who has awakened, tenderness and strength are no longer opposites. He can protect without possession, act without arrogance. In the woman who has awakened, wisdom and eros are no longer divided. She can love without losing, nurture without enslaving. Their meeting does not erase difference, it sanctifies it. They stand as two mirrors reflecting one light. But even this union is not static. The conjunctio must be renewed again and again through consciousness. The opposites never cease their tension, for it is through tension that life continues to evolve. The task is not to freeze perfection, but to live dialogue, to allow spirit and instinct, thought and feeling, male and female, to converse eternally within the human heart. Sometimes I imagine humanity as a vast alchemical vessel in which these opposites ferment. Each man and woman who undertakes this work contributes to the transformation of the whole. Every act of awareness purifies the collective unconscious a little more. Thus, the reconciliation between masculine and feminine is not merely personal, it is cosmic labor. Through each individual, the self seeks to unite what history has torn apart. The redeemed man is no longer ashamed of vulnerability. He understands that openness is not weakness, but truth. He meets the feminine within and without with reverence, knowing that she mediates the mystery of life. The conscious woman, in turn, no longer despises reason or strength. She honors the masculine as the arm of the divine, the builder of form through which spirit incarnates. Together they embody the full image of humanity. When they part for love, being human is subject to impermanence. They do so without bitterness. Each remains whole, enriched rather than diminished. They have given birth to something indestructible, consciousness of the eternal dance between opposites. Their love continues not as possession but as pattern, shaping the soul of the age. This is the secret of redemption. It does not erase history, it illumines it. The suffering that once seemed senseless becomes sacred necessity. The shadowed man, once feared, is revealed as instrument of awakening. Through his darkness, the woman met her own light. Through her light, the man glimpsed his own soul. Together, they enacted the mystery of transformation that sustains creation itself. In such understanding, the war between genders dissolves. There is no longer guilt or blame, only recognition that both principles serve the same purpose, the evolution of consciousness. Every conflict becomes opportunity, every meeting a mirror. Man and woman cease to be adversaries. They become fellow pilgrims on the path toward the self, and in that recognition, love returns to its original sanctity. It is no longer desire seeking satisfaction, nor idealism seeking proof, but the silent joy of two beings who have seen the same truth. They no longer ask for eternity, for they have touched the eternal within the moment. Their union, though transient in time, participates in the timeless. When the redeemed masculine and conscious feminine walk side by side, they carry within them the memory of what the world can become. Their gaze restores meaning to matter. Their touch sanctifies the ordinary. Through them, the gods are reborn, not as idols or doctrines, but as living forces within the human heart. This is the culmination of the work that began in darkness, not escape from humanity, but its fulfillment. The man no longer fears his depths. The woman no longer fears her power. Together they serve the mystery from which both emerged. Their love, tested by shadow, becomes the light by which future generations may see. In the end, all dark paths lead toward light, though they wind through the labyrinth of suffering. What begins as fascination with shadow ends as revelation of the self. The woman who has endured the dark man's spell stands now at the threshold of awakening. Her eyes, once clouded by desire, perceive with new clarity. She sees that her journey was not a mistake, but a design woven by the unconscious to bring her to consciousness. When one emerges from the underworld, the first sensation is strangeness. The familiar world feels distant, like a dream one has outgrown. She moves through it as one newly born, tender, cautious, filled with silent wonder. The pain remains, but its meaning has changed. What was once wound has become initiation. She has learned that consciousness is not granted, it is earned through descent. To awaken from enchantment is to take back all projections, the divine, the demonic, the ideal, the fear. She reclaims from the man everything she had bestowed upon him, her light, her darkness, her longing, her wisdom. At first, this feels like emptiness, as though something precious has been stolen. But slowly she realizes that what has returned to her is power. She had lent her soul to another. Now it is her own again. The most painful recognition is that the man never existed as she imagined him. He was a vessel of forces, a mirror in which her psyche played its ancient drama. To forgive him is to forgive illusion itself, to accept that the unconscious educates through projection. The tragedy of love was the price of this education. And now, free of enchantment, she stands in a clearer world where love and knowledge no longer oppose each other. The awakening does not come in a single moment. It arrives in waves, each carrying deeper understanding. One day, she no longer dreams of him. Another, she feels compassion without pain. At last, she can remember without yearning. The archetype releases her, not because it has grown weak, but because she has grown conscious. The energy that once bound her outward now circulates inward, feeding creativity, wisdom, and quiet joy. She discovers that what she feared most, the darkness, was never her enemy. It was the self calling from behind the mask of suffering. What she took for demonic possession was the psyche's desperate attempt to awaken her. The dark path was not his alone. It was hers, the path by which her soul sought wholeness through confrontation with its own depths. In this recognition, fear transforms into reverence. To awaken is to see that no man, however dangerous, has the power to destroy or redeem the soul. He can only reveal what is already present within. The shadowed man did not create her pain, he illuminated it. He did not bestow meaning, he uncovered it. His presence served as catalyst, nothing more. When she understands this, the burden of blame lifts, and with it the chains of dependency. She no longer measures love by intensity, but by truth. The old fever of passion appears now as the body's metaphor for the soul's transformation, a fire meant to purify, not to possess. She does not condemn it, but she no longer seeks it. Her desire has matured into longing for authenticity, for communion with that which endures beyond the flux of human projection. This longing is not for another person, but for alignment with the self. Such awakening carries solitude, but it is no longer lonely. The silence that once frightened her has become companion. Within it, she senses a living presence, the same intelligence that orchestrated her journey. She sees how every encounter, every heartbreak, was an act of grace disguised as catastrophe. Life, she realizes, is not governed by chance, but by symbolic necessity. Every experience is revelation in motion. The integration of opposites follows. Love and loss, innocence and knowledge, light and shadow, all are seen as aspects of one continuum. The divisions that once tore her apart dissolve in understanding. She no longer seeks to banish pain, for she sees that pain is the shadow of meaning. To live fully is to embrace both. Thus, peace arises not from avoidance, but from participation in the wholeness of life. I have often written that the shoe that fits one person pinches another. Each soul must walk its own path of transformation, and this woman's path led through the dangerous terrain of another's unconscious. Yet, because she walked it consciously at last, it has become sacred ground. The footprints of her suffering mark the way for those who will come after her. Through her, the collective gains wisdom. When she meets men now, she does so with seeing eyes. She no longer projects gods or demons upon them. She listens, observes, discerns. She feels the presence of shadow, but does not fear it, for she knows her own. The dark men of the world can no longer ensnare her, because she recognizes the archetype behind their charm. Awareness has turned fascination into insight. Her strength is quiet but unmistakable. She no longer seeks validation. Her worth radiates from within. Her love, once bound to personal drama, has widened into compassion for all who struggle in darkness. She becomes, without intending, a healer not by method, but by presence. Those who approach her feel the calm of someone who has suffered consciously. She mirrors their pain without absorbing it, reflects their light without claiming it. In this way, the woman who was once victim becomes vessel. Through her, the self speaks. Her life becomes testimony to the law of transformation, that every descent, when lived consciously, leads to resurrection. She embodies the reconciliation of opposites, tenderness joined with strength, humility with insight, passion with serenity. She has become the very image of the feminine soul redeemed through shadow. Yet awakening is never final. The psyche continues its dialogue with the unknown. New challenges arise, new projections tempt, but she faces them now with the knowledge that all darkness conceals meaning. Fear may visit, but it no longer reigns. She walks with the same awareness that once belonged to the dangerous man, but purified, tempered by love. She has become what she once sought, one who knows the depths and can walk among them without being consumed. When she looks back upon her journey, gratitude floods her heart, not gratitude for suffering, but for what suffering revealed. She blesses even the man who wounded her, for he was the shadowed messenger of her destiny. Without him, she would never have met herself. She understands now that fate is not cruel, it is intimate. It gives us precisely the experiences our souls require to awaken. And so she lives differently. She no longer seeks escape from contradiction, but expression of it. Her art, her words, her silence, all carry the imprint of her descent. She has learned to translate darkness into language the world can understand. Through her, the hidden voice of the unconscious finds articulation. In this, she serves the collective, for what is made conscious in one soul lightens the burden of all. The awakening from the dark path culminates in humility. She no longer believes she has conquered anything. She knows that consciousness is a fragile flame, easily extinguished by pride. Therefore, she tends it quietly, as one tends a sacred fire. Each day she descends a little, ascends a little, maintaining balance between the seen and unseen. Her life becomes ritual, not of dogma, but of awareness. Sometimes she will feel the old darkness stirring a memory, a dream, a fleeting sadness, but now it no longer terrifies. She greets it as one greets an old teacher. The darkness has become her ally, reminding her that growth never ends. To live consciously is to live in perpetual dialogue with shadow, to remember that wholeness includes everything we once rejected. The soul does not emerge from the dark path unscarred, but it emerges real. The illusions that once insulated it from pain are gone. In their place stands authenticity, and authenticity, though it costs comfort, grants peace. For what is real no longer fears change, it participates in it. The awakened woman moves through life as through a great mystery, reverent and unafraid. When she speaks of love now, she speaks with gravity. She no longer romanticizes the union of souls, she honors its peril. She knows that love is not possession but revelation, the meeting of two mirrors reflecting the same infinite light. Such love cannot enslave, because it begins in freedom. It does not demand eternity. It recognizes that eternity is already present in each conscious moment. The dark path, then, was never a deviation but a design. Through it, the unconscious sought expression. Through her, consciousness was born. The man, the pain, the loss, all were instruments of that unfolding. What once seemed catastrophe has become myth, the eternal story of descent, suffering, and illumination that every soul must live in its own form. I say to all who have walked such a path, do not curse your darkness, for it is your teacher. Do not cling to your light, for it is only the shadow of greater radiance yet unseen. The task is to hold both, to stand at the center where they meet, and to know that in this union lies the mystery of being. Thus ends the dark journey, not in triumph, but in understanding. The woman who once trembled before the dangerous man has become what he symbolized, one who has met the gods and the demons within and can walk among them without fear. She carries in her eyes the calm of one who knows that even in the deepest night, the stars are watching and that darkness itself is their cradle.